House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to meet with President Biden about the debt ceiling. House Republicans, who refused to raise the debt ceiling without a spending freeze, have persuaded themselves, ignoring their own economists, that defaulting on the national debt might not produce a catastrophic depression. Here, as with climate change, wishful thinking has led them to delusion. The wish that begot the thinking is the notion that reducing the size and scope of government will make us freer. I just published a critical history of libertarianism. The ideas that undergird Republicans' demands are the ones I warn about in my book: apocalyptic pessimism about government, and irresponsible vagueness about what will take its place. The book aims to be a kind of Narcan for the many who have consumed toxic levels of libertarian ideas. The debt standoff shows its urgency. The Republican bill, which authorizes the federal government to pay the debts it has already incurred but freezes spending at 2022 levels, is called the Limit, Save, Grow Act. Its rationale, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, R. Caliph, explained, is to lift the debt limit, limit government spending, save taxpayers' money, and grow the economy. Meanwhile, the markets are terrified. The bill doesn't say what spending it would freeze. Congressional appropriations committees would eventually have to make those decisions. This is politically clever because it creates plausible deniability for most of the specific cuts that the bill entails. Don't worry, we'll cut something else. This vagueness is also revealing. Minimal state libertarians tend to rail against the government without looking too closely at the details of what government does. If one examines those details, the bill's effects aren't pretty. Because it exempts the Pentagon, Veterans Services, Social Security, and Medicare. The only remaining targets are healthcare, science, education, climate, energy, border and airport security, labor, and medical research, which must overall be cut by 22%. The Biden administration estimated the effect: FBI agents would have to be furloughed. Cuts in the Federal Aviation Administration would reduce the number of air traffic controllers and produce more flight delays. The National Weather Service would become less accurate. There would be fewer rail safety inspections. Pell Grants for low-income college students would be cut. Disclosure: those grants helped me attend the University of Chicago. Housing and childcare assistance would be cut off for many. The bill is not wholly lacking in specifics. It demands that major parts of Biden's climate law be repealed and fossil fuel production accelerated. Many libertarians have been denying climate change for decades. Without the activism of the Koch brothers, America might have begun addressing the issue in the 1990s. The disaster that they then refused to believe in might not now be happening. The bill also cuts funding for the Internal Revenue Service, a move that would increase the federal debt by $120 billion in the next decade, but which is consonant with the fantasy of having no government and never having to pay taxes. New work requirements would reduce access to Medicaid and food stamps, mostly for genuinely eligible people who will be baffled by the paperwork. Because the costs of programs rise with inflation, the bill would save about $3.2 trillion, according to the Congressional Budget Office. The talk of growing the economy implies that none of those cuts would have an economic cost. But America's growth is not the product of a minimal state. The national debt is, of course, a problem. One solution that the Republicans won't consider is any increase in taxes. On the contrary, they have said that their first priority is to make the Trump tax cuts for the rich permanent. One is tempted to say that the Republican Party has been captured by its extreme wing. But even the moderate wing, which was humiliated in its negotiations with the leadership, isn't so moderate on the spending question. Sen. Mitt Romney, R. Utah, has been notably sane on many issues. But when he was a presidential candidate, he said, "Did you know that government, federal, state, and local, under President Obama, has grown to consume almost 40% of our economy? We're only inches away from ceasing to be a free economy."